Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. We're waking up with watches and starting the weekend right, and everything is for sale. Reach out to me for pricing questions. I am tmosso at thewatchbox.com. We love to buy, trade, and sell, which means, sure, these are for sale, but we're also looking to build inventory. We want to buy your watch. We pay cash, we pay fast, one watch or an entire collection, no upper limit on value paid, and we love to trade. So if you want to take a watch you have and trade it towards one of the watches on this show or our website, buy, trade, or sell, email me, tmosso at thewatchbox.com. All right, we're going to start off with one of the most unusual Omega launches of the last decade, and also one of the most versatile. Previewed by a Platinum Limited Edition in 2017 and launched for series production in 2019, this is the Omega Seamaster Aqua Terra Worldtimer, 43 millimeters in stainless steel. It's an attractive 150-meter water-resistant, virtually amagnetic surf turf Seamaster. That is to say, it is a watch you could wear for dress or for play, including aquatic. Taking a look at the dial, you can see there is a variation on Omega's teak deck. Here we have a little bit of an arced pattern to the blue metallic base, representing the teak on the deck of a yacht. And then we have applique individual hour indices. We have a broad arrow minute hand, and then we've got reference cities on the chapter rings outboard, 24 principal reference cities for 24 principal time zones. And then you can see that there is a bicolor 24-hour reference ring inboard. So you just look at the hour adjacent to each one of these cities, and you know what time it is in that remote time zone. So, for example, let me show you this. We are in, let's say we're in Denver, or better yet, let's say we want to know the time in Denver. Easy. You simply look adjacent and you can see that it is 11 p.m. in Denver. And then you read your minutes at center. So it doesn't matter what the local time is. You read the hour adjacent to the reference cities. I can see that in Bienne, the home city of Omega, and that's why they use Bienne instead of Paris, it is currently 7 in the morning. So that's how that works. Now the timepiece has a screw-down crown, 150-meter water resistance, and I mentioned it's amagnetic, thanks to an anti-magnetic escapement and a silicone hairspring. It's a 60-hour power reserve automatic winding with a robust shock-resistant balance architecture, so it's water-resistant, shock-resistant, and resistant to magnetism. The watch also uses a fascinating Calibre 8938 that is, of course, chronometer certified. And if you look at the reverse, you can see it is a master coaxial, which means it is, among other things, a COSC certified Swiss chronometer. Putting it on the wrist, you can see it probably wears better on a small wrist as a 43 millimeter in steel. On the strap, I consider it to wear better than on the bracelet. I'd recommend this watch for a wrist of 14 centimeters circumference or larger when it is on the strap. Just a wonderful all-arounder and one of the most unconventional watches Omega's ever made. It's also got plenty of lume, no shortage there. You'll find that this is a very versatile watch that's easy to live with on a daily basis and great for those who have friends around the world. Now, a very different take on travel time watches. Here we have the Rolex Oyster Perpetual GMT Master 2. This is the 116710LN, the black bezel, a discontinued model that's a favorite of many because it's got a low-key monochromatic look about bezel and dial, and it reads almost like a Rolex dive watch at first glance. That's before you see the green GMT Master script and the green varnished 24-hour hand. Now, because the bezel is a GMT bezel, it rotates in both directions, you can use it to gauge a third time zone temporarily. What you do is you set your local time to whatever you like. You set the green hand to Greenwich Mean Time, and then you use your destination's GMT offset along with the bezel to read the current time at your destination. That's how you read concurrently 3 different times on this watch. The bezel insert is made of ceramic for scratch resistance. The actual indices and numerals are platinum deposits to resist tarnish and oxidation. That's the same reason the indices and the hands are made of 18-karat white gold. The dial base is a lustrous black lacquer. The watch has a triplock crown. It is 100 meters water resistant with a 48-hour power reserve and a chronometer certification, so it is highly refined internally and handsomely executed externally in Rolex 904L steel. Getting close again, you can see that the watch features a Easy Link 5mm adjustment inside the clasp. It's a tool-free way to add or subtract the equivalent of one removable link. It's a 40mm watch, but it's also a super case. watch, which means it has a bigger, squared off, chunky, and sheer case profile. You can see it wears well on my wrist of 16 centimeters, and being only 12.2 millimeters thick, it really does fit quite well underneath the cuff. Take one last look down the barrel, and then one over the top. All right, we're going to keep going with bracelet, but we're going to take a very different tack here, as we have the full rose gold, media blasted Bulgari Octofenicimo automatic. Now, the original Octofenicimo automatic in 2017 won the GPHG men's watch prize, but it was all titanium, and to some, it felt almost toy-like. Well, this watch remedies that problem. If you want your luxury watch to feel as well as look luxurious, then this is the ticket. I measured it before the show, and it is 5.2 millimeters thick, it's 40 millimeters in diameter, and it's only 46 millimeters from lug to lug, meaning when you throw it on the wrist, you really get the benefit of its compact dimensions. It slides effortlessly underneath the cuff, and it's not too broad across the wrist. As you can see, the bracelet splays out quite a bit, even from overhead. So this is a watch that you might want to try on a wrist as small as 13.5 centimeters circumference. The bracelet clasp and case are all media blasted rose gold. You can see the dial has the same finish as well. The bracelet tapers. You can see it has a little bit of a recess on its center profile to give it another focal plane and some depth. And then we get down to the clasp, and you can see brilliantly they create a little recess inside the terminal links adjacent to the clasp, so that when it closes, the combined clasp and link is actually only as thick as the link by itself, so it's a very smartly designed watch. Now, taking a quick look at the movement, you can see this is the BVL 138. It's the same watch movement you'll find in the standard steel or titanium versions of this watch. It has a platinum micro rotor, a 60-hour power reserve, and it's only 2.23 millimeters thick. It also features a handsome combination of hand finishing and mechanical finishing. So like your JLCs, your Audemars Piguets, your FP Journes, it's in that league. It deserves those comparisons. And of course, we have a combination of mirrored anglage, Côte de Genève, engine turning in two sizes under the rotor, as well as underneath, or I should say under the balance and under the winding mass, and satination on the wheels, including a lovely sunburst pattern on the rotor itself. And they use a platinum mass, not gold, not tungsten. 60 hours of reserve for a movement that's less than 2.5 millimeters thick. This is an engineering masterclass. And I've spoken to Fabrizio Bonamassa of Bulgari, and he says, when you're designing a watch like this, you have to work hand in hand with watchmaking and engineering, because you simply can't have a watch like this without a movement to suit. And that's where this watch comes from. It is a holistic product of an integrated manufacturer, and Bulgari makes cases, clasps, bracelets, dials, and movements. Okay, we're going big with our sports watches now, not on a bracelet, but on a strap. And this is a signature look for Richard Mille. This is the RM1102, which means it's your RM11, but it's got a GMT built in. You have a pusher adjuster for that GMT secondary hand. And then we have quite a bit going on the dial. You can see that there is a double-digit date with 2 date discs, and there is a quick set system for that double-digit date. But then if you look carefully between 4 and 5, there's also a month indicator. So with the double-digit date and a month, we've got an annual calendar here. You need only adjust it once during the jump from February to March. And it's a chronograph, but it's also a flyback chronograph, reset and restart without first stopping it. Now, there's more going on. As you can see, the chronograph features a 24-hour sub-register, and Richard Mille is intimately involved in international sports car racing. He's actually, I believe, on the FIA rules committee. So 24-hour enduros are definitely his thing. So this has a motorsports-inspired 24-hour timing register for the chronograph. Most chronographs have 12 hours or no hours. This has 24. The watch is 41.5 millimeters wide in titanium grade 5. And then from lug tip to lug tip, it's 49.6 millimeters. So though it is large with its cambered and curved caseback, this tonneau is actually quite wearable. Let me give you a quick view of the lume. Plenty of luminescence. You can see that there are actually 2 sapphires, one over the dial and then one on which the features such as the registers and the numerals are printed. And then there is a carbon fiber chapter ring outboard that features the luminescent hour indices. The movement is made of grade 5 titanium, and that's bridges and plates to reduce the mass of the movement. It has 2 barrels, automatic winding. It has a 55-hour power reserve, and it's adjusted in 5 positions. As you can see, RM uses clear sapphires to give the watch a more modern look, and there are little adjustable winglets on the rotor that change its polar moments. So if you're a very active person, your Richard Mille watchmaker can tone down the winding efficiency to give the winding system a rest. If you're a desk diver like me and you're more or less sedentary all day, you might want it to have a very vigorous winding set so that it will wind itself energetically with an economy of motion. Now, it does have a deployant clasp. This is made by G&F Chatelain. The case is made by Valgine. The base movement is made by Vaucher. Audemars Piguet is a stakeholder, though it's not manufacturing this particular Richard Mille model. So there's a lot involved in making an RM, usually 4, 5, 6 or more companies involved in both the ownership of the brand and the assembly of the parts. So this is Chatelain's leaf spring system. It closes and snaps shut the buckle. Taking a quick look at the side, you can see the typically sculptural and revealing Richard Mille structure. You can see the columns that feature the spline screw shafts for assembly of the bezel and the case back. A very cool watch, 50 meters water resistant, so you're okay for surface swimming. You don't want to take it into deep submergence. Let us take a look at something. I mentioned that RM is partially owned by AP. Well, how about a pure breed? This is a watch that came out in 2019 and it's marketed as a ladies' watch, but to be perfectly honest, at 39.5 millimeters wide, I consider this millinery frosted gold philosophique to be a unisex option, and I'll show you why. There are no gems. It's not tiny, it's not quartz, and on my wrist of 16 centimeters, this actually looks perfect. This wears a lot like a 36 millimeter Rolex Datejust, and that is a unisex watch. It's very thin too, at 10.9 millimeters, so it slides underneath the cuff. Lots to love here. The Philosophique line of single-hand watches dates back to the early 80s at Audemars Piguet, but this is one of the most interesting in that it uses an unconventional mechanism with off-centered gearing of a leaf-style hand to trace an elliptical arc around the dial that mirrors the shape of the watch. Now you can see that this leaf hand is made of rose gold and it's half frosted for better contrast. The dial is described as hammered-like because it has the look of a hammered dial, but there's more going on. It's not just the dimpling. You can see it has a lovely brown bronze metallic coloration, and then there's this wonderful spiral brushed pattern, and it's not like a conventional sunburst. This is really deep and grooved, giving the watch a lot of personality. This Florentine surfacing of the case is executed using a small drill, so no two are exactly alike, and you can see that the frosting encompasses the lug profiles in the case band, the lug hoods, and then the bezel. And one feature that I adore here is that the bezel actually cuts underneath the sapphire, so roughly half the bezel is external and exposed, and then the other half of the chiseled bezel is underneath the sapphire. On the reverse side of the watch, you can see AP manufactured Calibre 3140. It's a 50-hour automatic winder, ceramic bearings, bidirectional winding, and it's based on the 3120, which you'll find in, for example, the automatic series production Audemars Piguet watches, and you'll find the 3126 in the Royal Oak offshore. So this watch is built like a sports watch movement, meaning it's fairly thick for durability, and then it has a full balance bridge with a Gyromax style free sprung balance. And though the watch doesn't have a seconds hand or even a minute hand, it does feature a hacking system. And then we have the coats of arms of the Audemars and Piguet families. Audemars Piguet wants to remind you that it is the oldest continuously operating Swiss brand run and owned by the founding families. So they are an independent, even though they're a billion-dollar company, they are nevertheless independently owned. They're not one of the indies, the small independent brands, but they're definitely not owned by a group or conglomerate. Okay, let us jump into a watch that, truth be told, is part of a brand owned by a conglomerate. Launched 7 years ago, would you believe, this black dial stainless steel Seamaster Ultra Thin Perpetual might be the best watch that JLC makes. As you can see, this is the so-called Dr Strange, albeit in steel with a black dial, and it includes the IWC Kurt Klaus Perpetual calendar system. So you have a little pusher on the side. It is mechanically programmed through the year 2100. So to reset it, all you do is you start pushing and you adjust the date, the day, the date, the month, the moon phase, the year, even the decade automatically update because it's programmed. So you don't need to look all of this up. You don't want to make a setting during the danger zone. And you may ask, when is the danger zone? The danger zone is when this little aperture above the hand turns red. So that's your danger zone indicator. The watch features lovely applique dart style indices, and it's only 9.3 millimeters thick, 39 millimeters in diameter, so it does live up to its name. For a modular automatic perpetual calendar, it is quite thin. On the backside, we have JLC Calibre 868, automatic winding, 40 to 43 hour power reserve, free sprung, ceramic bearings, and like the Bulgari, like the Audemars Piguet, here we have a combination of hand finishing and machine finishing to create a pleasing appearance, but also hold the price down. And the watch does feature hacking or stop seconds, which is a surprisingly uncommon feature on Perpetual calendars. It's also free sprung, as you can see, for precise adjustment, and the screws are real fired blued screws. They're not the kind that are chemically dyed. Note we have a little pull tab spring bar here, and this is a feature that you generally don't see on modern JLC watches, a full deployant clasp on a steel watch. They're trying to keep prices down today. Well, they used to give you a full deployant clasp, and happily, this is one of the latest versions. So this is a pull tab release that pops the clasp off the strap. Then with this pull tab spring bar, you can pop the strap off the case. So you can actually swap a strap on this watch without any tools whatsoever. It looks great on the wrist, and I'll show you why. You can see that the Dauphine heads at center are half frosted to increase the contrast with the dial and legibility. On the wrist, it wears a treat. The timepiece is super flat, and with a domed bezel, this is a watch that slides easily beneath the cuff, but with a steel case and a black dial, you can absolutely wear this casually. This isn't a super formal dress complication. It's got a little bit of versatility built into it. Okay. Now let's talk about more affordable options, starting with this watch right here. Now in 2005, Omega and longtime Omega ambassador Michael Schumacher presented the Michael Schumacher Legend Collection. It included 3 watches, one with a silver dial, one with a red dial, and then this right here, which includes a black dial. It's a body double for a moon watch, meaning it's a 42mm steel case, not the later 44.25, but it's also got something approaching a Paul Newman dial. So if you remember the Singer exotic dials on the Paul Newman Daytonas in the 60s and 70s, this is very close to that. So between being a moon watch that looks like a Paul Newman, you could call it a Paul New Moon, and you would not be wrong. But it's also got a lot of features that set it apart from the moon watch. For one thing, it's automatic. For another, it's got a date. For another, it's got a sapphire crystal. It also has applique indices, which are beautifully polished and rhodium plated with an applique Omega logo. It's got an upscale look to it, and unlike a moon watch, it's 100 meters water resistant. There's plenty of lume, and as you can see, the watch does include features you won't get on a moon watch, such as hacking seconds, and of course there is a quick set for the date. Flip it over, you can see a Michael Schumacher dedication and Ferrari red on the back. So this watch came as Schumacher was coming off his 7th World Championship. So heady times. That was peak Schumacher. Now the movement being based on a Frederic Piguet 1285 is a high horology automatic base. It gives you more power reserve than a moon watch with 52 hours of power reserve, and it's a COSC certified Swiss chronometer. It also includes other non-moon watch refinements such as column wheel function selecting and a smooth vertical clutch. The balance is free sprung for durability and precise adjustment and adjusted in 5 positions. And critically, this watch is pre-coaxial. This is Calibre 3301, later versions 3313. There are some movements to which the coaxial was unsuited. One of them was the 1285 and another was the 2892. So you want to get one of these watches with the Piguet base pre-coaxial, and that's exactly what this is right here. They're more durable. It's also an easy watch to wear. If you can wear a moon watch, you can wear this. Though be alert, because it has a full bracelet. It's 53mm from end link to end link, so it's broad across the wrist. On the bracelet, you want a wrist of at least 15 centimeters circumference to wear this watch. Sticking with our affordable theme, we're talking about what might be the most important, certainly the most appealing, Tag Heuer of the 1990s. Launched in 1996 to commemorate Tag Heuer's IPO, this is the Carrera 1964 re-edition, so named because it is very literally a re-edition of the old 2447D in appearance and size, but also because at the time, it was believed the Carrera was launched in 1964. It came out in 63. Still, they had the right idea. This was the first modern Tag Heuer product to eschew completely the Technique d'Avant-Garde prefix. So it's not a Tag Heuer. As you can see, it's not labeled tag on the dial or the crown or the case back or even the buckle, which was specific to the watch. This is a Heuer, or at least that's how they want to market it. Now, the watch includes other period features, such as a plexiglass crystal and an original tritium dial. You can see it is signed T-Swiss on the minutes, or the hours register, I should say. The watch also includes manual winding and a moonwatch caliber. You can see this is the famous reference CS3110 inside La Magna 1873 base. That's the same movement that is essentially one and the same same as the Omega 1861 that flies with NASA. So it's a moonwatch caliber, manual wind, 48-hour power reserve, 3 hertz beat rate, 18 joules, and it has a cam lateral clutch setup that is super tough, but also remarkably refined, as just by sound and feel, if you didn't tell me this is a cam-operated chronograph, I would think it is a column wheel chronograph. And that is the industrial might of Swatch Group and La Manna in the modern era. It also features high-end applique faceted, polished, and satinated hour indices, and you can see this dial is untouched with no marks whatsoever, no dirt, no oxidation, no handling marks on the beautifully polished rhodium-plated steel hands. It really is quite perfect, and it includes those signature thrusting angular integrated lugs as originally penned by Jack Heuer for the 1963 Carrera, and this is the single defining feature of every Carrera, chronograph or not. It is these lugs, the most admired part of the watch through the years. And on the wrist, you can see at 36 millimeters, it's not as big as you might expect. It is an option for men and women, as it's relatively constrained across the wrist, and you can see I've got plenty of clearance on each side of my wrist, and it's even low enough that it should fit underneath most cuffs. A real cool vintage throwback. This is the Tag Heuer to own from the 1990s. Let's talk about independence. Let's talk about some of my favorites. Let's talk about Grunenfeld. Out of Oldenzaal in the Netherlands, Tim and Bart Grunenfeld no longer take orders. Their order book is closed. They're not selling any more watches. They have years' worth of orders, and they're working on fulfilling them with the help of their new factory. But at well under 100 watches a year, even with added capacity, it is difficult to get your hands on a Grunenfeld watch. The way to get around that is to buy one pre-owned, and that's what we have here. For the first few years of the Grunenfeld's industrious innovation, and they are innovative, they made big watches. Their 1896 case is 43.5 millimeters, and that is the size the brothers like. But the 1941 case seen here is what collectors told them they wanted. At 39.5 millimeters in steel, this is the sweet spot for the modern indie collector scene. It's not petite, it's not sub 38, but it's also not oversized. And as you can see, it's a case sculpted like nothing else, with a rounded side, a concave bezel. It's got a fluted lug hood and a relieved and recessed lug profile. There's also a little bit of a step down at 6 o'clock and another step up at 12 o'clock to break up the round of the bezel. It's a deeply impressive watch with a Grunenfeld branded conical and knurled crown. We have fired steel alpha style hands in blue. We have a polished cannon pinion and a mirrored center to the minute hand. We have faceted and mirrored applique hour indices, and they really do twinkle like cut gems, black polished on their tops. This Dutch-made watch features a media blasted dial and an outer track, an inner dial, and then a seconds track. It is the 1941 Principia automatic, launched in late 2018 for the 2019 model year. It was the brothers' first ever automatic watch. The movement's an automatic winder with 56 hours of power reserve, and its standout feature is the degree of finishing on stainless steel bridges. That's right, the bridges are stainless steel. The Grunenfeld brothers, veterans of Audemars Piguet, Renault et Papy, have high standards for finishing, and you can see how much black polishing there is on this movement. Note the rotor shroud, as well as the screws. Everything that turns black as I angle this watch is black polished, and that's why it's called black polished, or pali noir. It is finished off with diamond paste, and it only reflects light from one angle. From every other angle, here it comes, it turns black. Now, the bridges include triple finishing, so you can see that internally they're media blasted and frosted. Then they have these raised and relieved channels on their edge that are satinated, and then you can see that the outer faces, the outermost faces, feature rounded mirrored anglage, so triple finished steel bridges. You can also see that there's satination on all the wheels, including solarization on the barrel, and that from the barrel down to the escape wheel, we have these golden chatons fixing the pivot jewels. That's a nod to the European era of pocket watch manufacture, when golden chaton would hold pivot jewels. The watch has a modern movement layout. As you can see, it uses a great wheel rather than a center wheel architecture, sometimes known as the Zenith setup. We also have a free sprung balance with a full balance bridge, another very modern architecture that makes it more shock tolerant, but you can also see being free sprung can take and hold a precise regulation, and the watch is adjusted in 6 positions, not the chronometer standard of 5, so it is very precise indeed. You can also see the interior angles created internally by the Grunenfeld brothers' skeletonization of the balance bridge. It's deeply impressive. Throw it on the wrist and you can see it includes a wonderful python leather strap in blue, a wonderful scaled top, and this is the real deal. You can actually see the patterns from the python. These have proven to be remarkably durable. I thought they would shed their scales like feathers, but I've seen at least half a dozen of these now, and they just don't age. They hold up over time. On the reverse side, you can see it's conventional leather with a signal orange, as the Grunenfelds are Dutch, and if you follow sports, you know Orange Army always means the Dutch team. And then we've got a matching Grunenfeld pin buckle. Thrown not on the wrist, it's a good look. Grayscale dial and case with the blue hands and the python strap, flat enough that it will fit underneath the cuff, and a very agreeable case size, easy to wear and comfortable. Again, my wrist 16 centimeters circumference, giving you a good sense of scale with this watch. But that's not to say major brands don't have soul. It's not all about indies. Patek Philippe respects its history, and like Grunenfeld, albeit on a much larger billion Swiss franc scale, Patek Philippe is family owned, and you don't need to buy a Nautilus or a Grand Complication to get a core collection Patek Philippe. You just need the manual wind Calatrava, and among manual wind Calatravas, the 5196 is the direct descendant of the original 1932 reference 96, which was both the first Patek Philippe with a reference number and the first Patek watch designed by the Stern family, which had just bought Patek out of bankruptcy in 1932. Well, that reference, the 96, had an over 40-year run into the early 1970s, and this today, the 5196, is the successor to the 96. It's 7.7 millimeters thick, it's 37 millimeters in diameter, it is platinum, meaning it has a diamond between the lugs, as all modern platinum Pateks do, and the watch includes a dial inspired by a vintage Calatrava 570. It should be noted that the Calatrava name wasn't thrown around for Patek dress watches until the 1980s, and it was created by collectors based on the logo of the company, the Calatrava cross, but it's unofficial. It's something that's become a collection name in the modern era, but historically it was a nickname and then only 80s forward. So the 96 retroactively is known as the first Calatrava, another feather in its cap. Now this one features Arabic numerals on the dial, always a sign of something special in the world of Patek Philippe, the white gold Breguet style Arabic numerals. Leaf hands, another feature with small seconds of the original 96. We have blended integrated lugs, form following function, 1930s style, and several different metallic finishings on the dial. As you can see, there's a satin finish, a matte finish underneath the dimple style minutes track. Then we have concentric brushed metal in a lighter silver shine underneath the polished hours. We have a polished inner chapter ring, and then a matte opaline silver white center dial with a sector style small seconds. Underneath the solid case back, which does add considerably to the weight and reduces the thickness, we have a Calibre 215 manual wind 44-hour power reserve, free sprung, Gyromax style balance, Patek Philippe seal. Rest assured, it's beautifully finished, even if you can't see it. And the watch wears beautifully. This is for him, for her, for dress or casual use. You can absolutely dress it down, but if you must wear tight dress sleeves, you can see how easily it slides underneath the cuff. Again, this is the Calatrava. If you're going to own just one, get the 5196. And among 5196s, the unique dial of the P model in platinum sets it apart as the most attractive and, in my opinion, most desirable. I don't feature a whole lot of vintage watches on this show, but then again, I don't often have the opportunity to show you a vintage Zenith El Primero in this condition. The timepiece I show you today is the A788 reference that was made in 1,400 pieces from 1971 to 1972. Who knows how many survive, and I can bet you none survive in this condition outside the factory museum. This is as good as it gets. Some might equal, but none surpass this watch. Take a look. It's a lovely cushion-shaped tonneau case, as they were wont to do back in the 70s. It's also lugless, which makes it wear beautifully. It's 41.5 millimeters from lug to lug, which means anyone can wear it. It's very short across the wrist, but then it's also broad from 9 to 3, at 37.5 millimeters. So when it's on the wrist, it looks bigger than it actually is. It's stainless steel and in great condition. I'll show you how much original factory metal this watch has in just a second, but get a sense of it on my wrist. A lovely combination. Silver, blue, and red on the dial. Now you can see it's a monoblock case, so the bezel and the mid case are all one piece, and then the case back screws on and the movement and the dial load through the back. The watch was awarded in 1972 as a prize in the Chicago Sweepstakes Sales Achievement Award competition. You can see additional information about the watch below remains sharply defined on this case back. The timepiece would have been quite a prize back then. You can see that there's still a sharp break between the satin finished hood of the case and then the polished flank, and you can see how sharp that defining line is all the way around, attesting to the condition of this watch, which has been sparsely, if ever, refinished. We have a vintage Zenith star on the crown, and then we have a correct period Zenith star on the vintage pin buckle. The watch includes period features such as the case shape and finish, as well as a plexiglass crystal and an original tritium dial, and tritium hands as well as dial base. You can see the dial features a double scale, so we have a tachymeter scale outboard, but we also have a pulsation scale. The tachymeter with the chronograph allows you to gauge speed. The pulsation scale allows you to gauge pulse rate. Now moving inboard, we have a sort of satin finished curtain that is brushed from top to bottom. Part of it is the track for the minutes and the seconds. That's brushed in silver. And then we have brushed blue metallic for the center dial with dished registers for constant seconds, chronograph hours, and then chronograph minutes. And as you can see, we have an applique Zenith star and all applique indices, so this is a way upscale dial. Each register also features a concentric pattern internally. Underneath the caseback, we have the Calibre 3019 PHC, the earliest version of the Zenith El Primero, as launched in 1969. It's an automatic winder with bidirectional winding action, a 52-hour power reserve. It has a quick set for the date. It has a column wheel and lateral clutch engagement. And the column wheel feel and sound are outstanding. And again, it's a column wheel with a lateral clutch, and it beats away at the El Primero's distinctive 10 beats per second or 36,000 vibrations per hour. Remember, the El Primero Historic, the first integrated automatic high-beat chronograph caliber when launched back in 1969, and this caliber 3019 PHC is the first version of the El Primero. The watch, reference A788, is exceptionally scarce. Again, 1,400 launched 50 years ago. How many of them remain in this condition? However, sometimes people prefer the latest tech and spec, and there's nothing wrong with that. Some folks also like larger watches. For them, this IWC Portugueser automatic, reference 5007 7-day, this is the 5007-10, this is going to be perfect for you. A Portuguese, the iconic dress watch of Schaffhausen. The watch, of course, launched in 1939 as the original oversized dress watch, because at the time, it had to be as accurate as a pocket watch, and the only way to do that was to put a pocket watch movement in a wristwatch, creating the original reference 325, the first Portugueser, and the first purpose-built oversized wristwatch. Now, the timepiece here is 43.2 millimeters in stainless steel with a blue metallic sunburst dial. It's nicely balanced with a power reserve indicator. You can see power reserve 7 days here, and then we have a small second sub-register. We also have a date. Let's just see if we're in the date change danger zone. No, we weren't there. You can see I have hacking seconds. I have a quick set date. And I have a lot of the features of the original 325, including blended lugs. It was designed in the same era as the original Calatrava 96. They feature very similar case and dial layouts. We have small seconds, albeit at 9 rather than 6. We have leaf-style hands. We have a railroad track outboard for reading the minutes. And then we have these lovely vertically oriented, no-nonsense functional Arabic numerals. So that's very form follows function, Bauhaus inspired. As you can see, it features a deployant clasp to protect against droppage. And then we have a 52,000 series automatic caliber. You can see through the case back, upgrades were made on this movement. This is the 52010, and it's a distant relative of the original year 2000 reference 5000. Many changes. We now have 2 barrels, and you can see them through the bridges. This fixes the original problem of the 7-day movement, which was that it would run too fast when fully wound and too slow when largely discharged. supercharged. With twin barrels, we now have a more even torque release that improves the timing of the watch throughout its 7-day power reserve. We have a little disc inside the rotor. It's rose gold with Probus Scafusia, reminding you that the motto of IWC translates roughly to a good solid watch made in Schaffhausen. And of course, in Schaffhausen, it's IWC and Moser. There are not many Schaffhausen-based watch brands, and most Swiss watch brands are in the French-speaking region, so IWC is unique, or at least not unique, but unusual in that regard. Another change for this generation, the 52000 series, it's not just twin barrels, it's also a fully ceramic Peloton pawl-based winding system. So both the wheel and the pawls themselves are made of ceramic so that it doesn't create the dirt on the movement problem that the Peloton, otherwise a great winding system, traditionally would create. We have a free-sprung balance adjusted in 5 positions, and it now beats away at 8 beats per second. Remember, back in 2000, the reference 5000 was a slow beat, 18,000 vibrations per hour. Free-sprung here for durability and precise adjustment. It also includes a handmade overcoil, so the watch keeps very accurate time in any physical position, regardless of how you leave it on your dresser or wear it on your wrist. It's a big watch, make no mistake. 43.2 millimeters is not to everyone's taste in the world of dress watches, but if you've got a taste for big watches or a big wrist and you need more hardware, this is a great way to get it. And this is the IWC Portugieser. By that, I mean it's one of the definitive choices in their collection. All right, this is an Indie, advised by an Indie, abetted by his offices and atelier. This is a watch from 2020 that was made as a limited edition in 2 flights. As you can see, I'm not giving anything away here, but this is a 50-piece limited edition in stainless steel by SCHWARZTIER and Kari VODOLLANIN. 50 with a blue dial, 50 with a gray dial. VODOLLANIN's contribution is the finishing of the movement and the creation of the dial. This is the Roma Synergy by SCHWARZTIER, which is a complete manufacture, and along with Kari VODOLLANIN and Atelier VODOLLANIN, they created this take on their Roma model. Now, the standard Roma is 42 millimeters. This is 39 millimeters, so it's more desirable on that basis alone. It's a fusion of the Roma design with Kari VODOLLANIN's distinctive house aesthetic with a little bit of Philippe Dufour's simplicity. Now, you can see the dial is made by Comblamin Quetrin, which is the dial factory owned by VODOLLANIN. You can see the dial has 3 different patterns and 2 different shades of gray. Outboard, we have a soleil or sunburst pattern, then we have écaille de poisson or fish scale for the inner dial, and then vague or wave for the small seconds. And you can see that the dial is all real rose lathe guilloche. This is not stamped. This is reductively engraved by a rose lathe to create these patterns laboriously over a long period of time, and it's executed on a dial that is made of solid sterling silver. All of these discs, galvanized gray, yes, but sterling silver. We have lovely alpha-style hands, and then we turn it over, and we have the ASC 200 automatic movement. Lots to love here. You can see that there's a rotor in precious metal, and that it's been finished by VODOLLANIN. Media blasted on its top. You can see there's a raised relieved channel around the edge, much like the bridges of the Grunenfeld watch we saw. And then you can also see that its outer face, the outermost face of the rotor, features mirrored anglage. Now, you'll also note that there's guilloche on the bridges. This has all been done the old-fashioned way by rose lathe, and you can see SCHWARZTIER by Atelier VODOLLANIN, and they are responsible for these finishing techniques. So you've got 3 different types of finish just on the rotor. You've got 2 different sizes of perlage or engine turning beneath it. You've got guilloche on the bridges. You've got mirrored anglage on the edge of the bridges as well. And you can see that VODOLLANIN spared no expense, as we have a double finishing, triple finishing really, on the ratchet wheel. Now you can see internally it's black polished. Then it has a very subtle solarization pattern. You see that spiral in 2 different shades? That's solarization. And I'm not sure if you could see it here, but if you could get a little bit closer, you would see that VODOLLANIN even mirror polished the edge of the teeth on the ratchet wheel, creating a true masterpiece. Atelier VODOLLANIN finished the movement, Comblamin Quetrin created the dial, and then SCHWARZTIER created the engineering for the Calibre. So as an automatic winder, it has an 84-hour power reserve energized by the micro rotor. It features hacking or stop seconds, and I should mention SCHWARZTIER builds the tough parts, not just the bridges, plates, and wheels, but also the balance, the hairspring, and the escapement. So it's a true manufacturer product, and it is a very easy watch to wear. We had a couple of these. We sold them all. They went fast. This is the last of them. And in my opinion, it's a best of both worlds. As in stainless steel at 39 millimeters, it's everyday durable, and yet it's almost like a backdoor way to get into Carré VODOLLANIN watchmaking without jumping on his wait list or paying the price of a proper Vent Huit. To my eye, this is just as attractive, and from a pricing standpoint, around 30 grand, it's much more accessible by any definition. You will have a hard time getting into Carré for that price. And now I have a triple whammy of virtuoso timepieces. We're going to go in order from smallest to biggest. And we're starting with the DEBATOON DB25 Power Reserve. Now, a lot of folks tell me that they like the idea of DEBATOON, the engineering, the rarity, with fewer than 3,000 watches made all time, the scarcity each year, with 200 to 220 watches made each year. And they like the fact that they load their watches with original patented engineering. What people don't like is the Star Trek look of the DB28. They don't like the floating lugs. They don't like the open dials. Well, I tell people the DB25 is the place to start if you want to get into DEBATOON, but you don't want a crazy looking watch. And this is the discontinued 40 millimeter DB25 Power Reserve. Quick fact, DEBATOON makes its cases, its dials, and its movements like F. Torbjorn. So all of the money is going into the product. The watch has a dial that features rose-lathe guilloche and a soleil pattern at center, fired blue titanium hands, and they have their own patent on the process for bluing titanium. Blueprinting, you can see there's a toroidal outer ring for the hours and minutes. Then we have a power reserve indicator that turns from silver to red as the power discharges, and of course you can manually wind it if you want, but this has their 6-day automatic winding Calibre 2024 base. So 6 days of power reserve, twin barrels, self-adjusting, that's patented. Everything that's blue on the case back has been fired blue out of titanium, and you can see that there's a shock protection system, a rather elaborate cantilever shock protection system at the center of the rotor. This allows DEBATOON to make the rotor's lever arm as long as possible and place the platinum mass as far out as possible to maximize winding efficiency. Now, that can always be a double-edged sword because it also subjects the bearing to unusual stresses. So they added this partially jeweled shock protection system, and the jewels are there to reduce stiction or friction that sticks. So you have a shock protected center, you have triple parachute shock protection for the balance. So we have 1, 2, 3 shock protection springs, that's patented. And then if you look carefully, you can see that the balance is actually a yoke. It's a cruciform pattern, 2 crossed yokes, not a wheel, but almost like battle axes crossed. The balance is made of titanium, the masses are platinum. That's there to reduce the effect of temperature on timing, but also to put as much of the balance's mass outboard as possible to maximize the polar moment. 2 hairsprings clamped together. They are more shock resistant than an overcoil, but they breathe concentrically like an overcoil. And this watch, being a 6-day power reserve, is a watch you can put down for a few days. You can put it down on Friday, put on your sports watch for the weekend, then put it back on Monday, and it will have lost no time. DEBATOON watches are excellent timekeepers. They're not just spectacular, they are functionally outstanding. And this is the one to get. If you want to get into the brand, this is a discontinued case size, 40 millimeters, something approaching the smallest case size they've ever made, and an ideal size for any wrist. Now, stepping up a little bit in size, but down in weight, here we have a grade 5 titanium DB25 Starry Various. What I love about this watch is that it gives you that accessibility that I associate with the DB25s, but you're getting a little bit more expressive. With the dial, you have a center section that is a fired disc of grade 5 titanium, oxidized and flame blued, with gold leaf representing the band of the Milky Way, and then the larger celestial bodies. They are actually white gold cabochons that are set into the dial to create the image of the larger bodies. And then we have this lovely cambered toroidal track outboard that features a matte silver base, blue printing, sectors for the minutes, radially arrayed Roman numerals, including a watchmaker's 4, and then these lovely rose gold cabochons for the hours that mirror the rose gold hands. Being grade 5 titanium, it is lighter than steel, but it is also harder and more scratch resistant than steel. Again, a solid dial, conventional lugs, still no floating lugs here. This watch is just over 10 millimeters thick, so it is very, very compact. And when we flip it over, you can see that the movement is gorgeous. Again, a 6-day power reserve, manual wind this time, but the patented self-adjusting barrels prevent you from overwinding the watch. You cannot accidentally overwind it. We have a deltoid-shaped barrel bridge that covers the two barrels, and the barrels actually have sapphire internally to reduce friction for the mainspring. You can see that there's a black polished center mount for the triple parachute shock protection springs. So triple parachute is their patented 1, 2, 3 shock protection spring mechanism. It's there for shock protection, yes, to prevent damage, but it's also there for chronometry to more rapidly recenter the balance staff in its pivot jewel. Now you can see that the springs themselves here have been blued at their outer edge where they join the edges of the balance bridge, and then the balance bridge has been black polished and continuously rounded all the way across. DEBATOON's known for style and engineering and exclusivity, but people often undersell the degree of finishing, and you can see here a Grubel 4C does no better. If you look carefully, you can see the Cote DEBATOON includes reversing of the wheel that lays down the stripes, as the darker edge of the stripe is facing outward on both sides. Normally, it would be linear. It would be to the left, to the left, to the left, to the left, to the left. Instead, here it's to the right, to the right, to the right, to the right, to the left, to the left, to the left, to the left. And that is a product of reversing the wheel so that the stripes mirror each other. Attention to detail. All wheels, including the barrels, are satinated, and you can see we have broad mirrored anglage on the edge of the bridges, as well as polished pegs for locating and black polished screws where the screws are visible. So this is a very handsome watch, 42 millimeters in feather light and titanium. Goes toe-to-toe with the FP Journe Chronomètre Bleu, and in my opinion, deals a knockout blow, aesthetically and technically. That said, if you want the most DEBATOON brand character, you want this. This is the most DEBATOON. Launched for 2021 in 10 pieces, this is the DB28 steel wheels Torbjorn sapphire. So it's based on the steel wheels from 5 years ago, but it adds blue sapphire and Torbjorn. Now, a DEBATOON Torbjorn watch is a precision instrument, as they are stated from the factory to run no worse than -1 + 1 second per day. We have blue sapphire caps on the open barrels. You can actually see the sapphire caps atop the barrels. We have a blue sapphire bridge that includes the pivots for the barrels, and then there is a metal frame that runs out around the outside as well as the inside of the sapphire bridge. That has also been mirrored and anglaged. And then we have a black polished titanium MotionWorks bridge underneath the hands. Everything that's metal and blue is fired blue titanium. And you can see there's a serrated minute track outboard for reading the minutes. And this is an unconventional elliptical hour hand and Delta Dart style minute hand. You can also appreciate the fact that there's an enormous black polished titanium cover over the base plate that rings the entire movement. You can see just how much black polish there is here. All of the hours are represented by little globes of titanium. And then there's the Torbjorn. We need to talk about the Torbjorn. Titanium, white gold, and sapphire. The Torbjorn is a 30-second Torbjorn, so it makes 2 turns every minute, twice as fast as a standard Torbjorn. The balance is of titanium with white gold masses, that's patented. You could see that the hairspring has been clamped by hand, so again, flat, but breathing concentrically like an overcoil. And then we have a proprietary silicone escape wheel to improve chronometry, reduce friction, and extend power reserve. With the 2 barrels and the Torbjorn, which beats away, by the way, at an El Primero like 36,000 vibrations per hour. But with the 2 barrels and that manic Torbjorn, we still get 5 days of power reserve, and the power reserve indicator and its mechanism are visible on the case back. Here we have satination, we have anglage, we have engine turning, and as you can see, we have perlage in different sizes. It's a gorgeous case back in a 43 millimeter diameter watch that has floating lugs. They float between 54 millimeters across the wrist and 51. So that's 54 millimeters, and that is 51 right there. You can also see that the watch is very thin, as it's only 11.6 millimeters thick. Hand finished, handcrafted, exquisitely engineered, and unlike anything else, this 10-piece limited edition packs everything DEBATOON knows about watchmaking into a single, effervescent, scintillating reference. Reach out to tmosso, once again, at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.